you all have the difficult job of bringing this whole conference to the finishing line. I know that, that we've had very good speakers. I'm sure that this is going to be very much in line. I was about to say we saved the best to last, but that would be disrespectful to everyone that's gone before. So I won't say that, but I will commend this panel in terms of its experience and expertise. And Catherine, I wonder if we might start with you in terms of your reflections on what you've heard, both in the panels this morning and indeed in the Outlook report. So, Anne-Catherine, the floor is yours.
So, firstly, I'm really happy to be there to exchange with you, and I can give a regional point of view because I'm at the role to put measure directly on the field for the Walloon producer. But can you just repeat your question?
Yes, of course, and I'll even be a little bit more specific. You know, I'm probably in my mind for you, I've got two specific questions. From what you've heard and reflect on to inform your answers, how do environmental realities for you shape the future of farm policy design? Let's start with that. And then if you could talk a little bit more about how Wallonia in particular is supporting farmers in adapting to some of the environmental challenges that we've talked this morning, how you see the future evolution of the Common Agriculture Policy in that respect. And then I'm throwing a lot at you so we can come back to some of these. What levers, policy levers, do you see as essential?
Okay, thank you very much. So, yes, firstly, what we must think about is that farmers are one of the first sector activities who are suffering climate change. Yes, more in the southern part of Europe, but yes, also in Wallonia with more drought and so on. So climate-related pressure, droughts, as I said, but also floods, biodiversity loss. And we work on the biodiversity loss thanks to the nature restoration law. I'm also a minister of nature. But yes, with the climate, we don't know how we will be able to answer all the challenges. So regarding this climate-related pressure, firstly, to set up insurance schemes. So we have at this moment some public funds at European level also, but also at regional level, but it's not enough because these funds, before, it was 1 year on 10 that we were using it. Now it's each year. So we must go towards some insurance systems, like in Spain it's well developed, or in Romania. So firstly, this fact, but also what we must really reflect on is that we don't want to be about greener and so more expensive food. No. Firstly, because we are not going to be competitive, and when we see all the treaties we sign, it will be so difficult, and we can do without be more expensive. Firstly, it's necessary to keep circular farming system at the territorial level. So in Wallonia, we have still in each part of Wallonia cows, pigs, and crops. For example, I don't know if there is some French colleagues here, but in France, there are some parts of France where there is no animals at the level of a region. And I was speaking with some farmers from them. They said it's more difficult to do agriculture there, to have my crop, because, and you speak as people who has still manure and so on to do agriculture, but us no, and so we have different thinking. And it's really important to keep this circular farming system, to keep livestock in our agriculture, and we have heard some message, some simple message. It was eat less meat. Okay, I think the message is better if it's eat better meat, because when saying eat less meat, some small farmer, and I was I arrived 10 minutes ago, when the price is decreasing, it's the smaller farm who are the first suffering, as you said. And it was the case there. There was less demand in meat, okay, but the first farms in difficulties were the small farms with grassland in the southern part of my region. But biggest farm with all the cows always in the stables, it was quite okay. They can suffer this market who was not really good. So circularity, also the cap. First, sure, I'm going to speak about the cap today. We are now building the future cap, and so we need a strong, well-financed and simplified cap, a strong cap regarding the strong ambition we have. And more simple, because we have a lot of agro-environmental measures, but a lot of farmers say to me, I want to do more environmental measure, but I don't want to have more controls and more troubles with the controllers, because, yes, it was 1 meter more, or that stupid things, but who give more constraints, more frustration, more, it's not a good feeling. Environmental measure must be linked to facilities, we go towards the objective and no more administrative load. And it's really the vision of the commissioner. It's to make simpler the future cap, not to have the eco scheme, the AECM, environmental measure conditionality, but have some practices, we go or we not go, but it's more simpler. And it's really important to have simplification also at legislative level with reintegrating all in the sectoral cap regulation. I'm going to finish here with one big point for me. It's formation. We need to form, to give instruction to our farmers. They have some, yes, but not enough. When I come from, I had an experience in research. I did a PhD. And when I see how far is the research, but how not far is the knowledge in the brains of our farmers, it's really a pity. So we must keep money in research, but we must put more money in the formation, and I am going to implement formation in my region. In my region, you have formation when you are a dentist or a doctor. So you have prime to go to follow formation. When we see the challenges that farmers have now, it's just normal to have also this formation available for farmers, and also, and I'm happy to be there to say that, exchange between countries of Europe is the strength of Europe, is to do that, because in my small region of Wallonia, I'm next to Germany, France, and I see that the farmers next to the border of France have some ideas that are not known of in the center of region, and the same in Germany. So please use this to and the ideas that are in the brains of the farmers next to France must be in all the brains of the farmers in all the regions. So really, the formation give the tools for the farmer, not a judgment of farmers, but form the farmers to give the tools and to advance in this direction.
And Catherine, thank you so much indeed for that. A lot of what you said resonated with me there, in particular the integration of livestock. When we talk about regenerative agriculture, I often think that it's one of the practices that we rather forget about, and yet there's a huge body of evidence that suggests that where you integrate livestock, you get that circularity and the benefits from that. So that makes sense to me. Just touching on the point that you had about farmer knowledge, Ed talked about it, and Ed Davey from World Resources Institute talked about this in the previous panel, the centricity of the farmer to the change that we're trying to create. You touched on this a little bit. What more can we do, not just at your regional level, but at national member state level, at European level, to catalyze that knowledge transfer, that sharing of best practices? we see it time and again when farmers come together. They are the most innovative people that we see. They deal with an unbelievable uncertainty in an often quiet way. They have the knowledge and the practices that can advance us. How do we get that flywheel, as they call it, going in terms of knowledge exchange and transfer?
I'm going to give an example of an initiative I launched 1 week ago. It's regarding the phytosanitary products. So everyone say we want to use less phytosanitary products, and we know the risk for the health, the impact for the environment. So the society say that and are in the judgment. It's legitimate, it's their health. And on the other side, the farmers say, I have no alternative. So I'm like blocked in this situation. And I said, okay, we are going to finish this debate, this null debate, because we are not going in a good direction. We are not advancing. And I said, we are going to put everyone around the table. And during some months, it's during the winter, it's better period for farmers. For each crops, we are going to put the farmers, so the organization representative of the farmers, but also representative of the new technologies, of varietal selection, of also biosolution, new biopesticide, also all the new practices that we can use, and the organic sector will be at each table also, because they are pioneers. We know that they took a lot of risk to test new practices, and that it can be used by all conventional farmers. And during some months, they are going to go through all the solution we have to use less pesticide and ideally zero pesticides. And I want that people from new technology here, people from varietal selection, to really, at the end, have a vision for the crop. For the next 10 years, we can do less 20%, 40%, 80%, and we can go in this direction. And after that, we can guide the research that we are going to continue in each crop, but also all the information that farmers must have to advance and guide the formation. And who I invite at this event, it's the France, with the program Parsada, who said who do the same things. And they said, we need a lot of millions to do, millions to do the research. And I say, okay, in Belgium, in Wallonia, we don't have a lot of budget. But what they are testing, doing the research, we can use that in Wallonia, and we can say to France, okay, what you are not doing, and we can do, because it's really linked to our characteristic in Wallonia. And they say, yes. And so I'm going to do a small trip in Paris in some months to really coordinate our research. So it's an example. The language help, sure. But we are all speaking English here, and more people speak English in our European Union. And so with some platforms of research center and the different politics, and we can build something. Concretely, how, I don't know, but we can go in this direction, sure. And for the formation, I really want to have some support of European, to have buses for 1 day, 60 farmers go in France, go in Germany, and to have the explanation from the fields, from farmer of other country, but yes, to go forward in this direction of formation, of innovation, and to answer these environmental and climatic challenges.
Well, Anne-Catherine, thank you so much indeed for sharing that. We wish you every success with that initiative. Your obvious passion and excitement for it comes through, and I think we would all agree that's exactly what we need. So thank you so much indeed for taking the time to join us. I'm going to go down to the other end of the table to you, Leonard, and bring you in. I mean, you've heard a lot already this morning, including that extremely helpful intervention from Anne-Catherine. How do you think about this, given where you sit in the policy-making world?
Thank you very much, and I come from the external part of the house. So I come from international partnerships, which, as you would consider, it's the policy coherence dynamics of what we do inside the European Union with what can happen, both in terms of spillover effects, but also in terms of development assistance. Now we speak about international partnerships with our partner countries. And in INTPA, we deal with basically 80 countries, Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America and the Caribbean. Big chunk. And everyone knows that 2025 is a year of what we call earthquakes in terms of seismic shifts in the geopolitics of food. First of all, both in terms of the greening dynamics. We come from farm to fork EU Green Deal, and we see where we are today. There is a clear softening approach. I just give you a file that I deal on a daily basis. European Union deforestation regulation. EUDR, pretty much a controversial discussion. The Commission just made another proposal. And we are, again, in the interinstitutional dynamics between now and the end of the year. There, we clearly gave a signal that if we want to handle and tackle deforestation at the core, we need a regulation. Voluntary approaches will not do the trick. And clearly that creates anxiety. If you use only carrots and you don't use sticks, you will not be transformative. We can go to many COPs, CBDs, it will not do the trick. Then there is a question of political will and willingness between regulation, trade policy, and development assistance. And development assistance can't just do compensating measures to all the globe. So we have a number of measures, including trade agreements. The big elephant in the room is clearly Mercosur, but also we have sustainability food systems chapters, CIFA, which are sustainability investment facilitation agreements, first one with Angola. I think, first of all, we need to do a stock-taking at the high governance level across the globe of where we are heading. Okay, COP, we are, as INTPA, not on the front line. That's our DG Klima colleagues. I am more on the front line in the Rome constellation. This is FAO, IFAD, and WFP. We have to reconcile. I just came from a strategic dialogue with WFP. We are having across the road. There are 300 million people in acute food hunger, which means people are dying, they don't have food. This is 300 million. These are forgotten crises, okay? Partly due also to climate shocks in the Sahel, in the Horn of Africa, and in other parts. You know what happened also in Jamaica a few days ago. So the first, what I call wake-up call, also from the European Union side, which we know today's world is very much on the defense side, on migration, on how to mitigate migratory shocks also because of climate and displacement of populations primarily through the Mediterranean, but also through the Turkish and Middle East, Near East border. And there is a call, a plea for help, for support. You know also what happened in the US earlier this year, massive cuts, including on the climate dynamics, but also on animal health dynamics. And we also try to support on One Health. So the first decision, and we are in the midst or in the beginning of the MFF multi-financial framework deliberations, another hot potato, both in the internal part, because the internal dynamic CAP regional policy is the big, but there is a proposal also on the external side. First decision of our political makers, EU and our member states is, do we want to continue showing leadership and levering our tools in a way to actually move outside the cracks of 2025? Are we bold enough? And how do we want to position ourselves with China, with the US, as it stands today, where even in events, topics like climate, gender, SDGs are sort of discarded or sidelined, and how do we want to play the geopolitical game in the production side? Because we have a humanitarian side, I will not enter into that, production side. Typology of production and supporting our partner countries, primarily in Africa, to actually also mitigate the import bill, because the import bill, food import bill in Africa is around estimated to be 100 billion. When you have a 100 billion food import bill in a context of high debt, credit squeeze, the risk of migratory flows is going to increase. So I think the models we are trying to do in INTPA with other parts of the Commission services is to push a vision, as you know, around Global Gateway, which is at 160 degrees. Like the Minister said, you can't support African farmers if you don't put research and innovation capacity also there in terms of climate-smart systems, what we call agroecology approaches. The debate around fertilizers, a very controversial debate. Do you move into a soil health dynamics with heavy fertilizer use and repurposing of big subsidies in areas where you have high fertilizer use with poor soils? So those are the debates we are having, and we will have an EU-Africa summit coming up in Luanda. We had an EU-Africa agriculture ministers meeting where Commissioner Hansen was there. So we have a strong, robust dialogue which encompasses climate issues, production issues, issues around value chains, typology of value chains. So what we are trying to do is at country level, but also in strategic corridors level, like Lobito Corridor, DRC, Angola, and Zambia, going into the details with our member states to accompany our partner countries in a vision which is value-based, which is rights-based, but also has the technology and the support also of research institutes. We support, and we work closely with the CIRADs and the Wageningers of this world, and also to get EU technology and expertise to support. So my message here is a plea to bring the global north and global south closer together in a geopolitically smart and savvy way, to bring also private companies and regions closer to each other, and to come up with smart, adapted solutions to the African continent, which could be win-win both for European companies, but also to African interests, including farming interests, but also private sector interests.
Leonard, thank you so much indeed for that. I'm really grateful for that more external perspective to the EU that you brought into it. Let me ask you a question, which I also give you every license not to answer if you don't want to. When you look at public policy making, whether that's here in the EU or indeed in other parts of the world, when you have the private sector interactions that you obviously have, how optimistic are you becoming, maybe not at all, that food security is starting to be seen as our national security or our global security? It's part of the security discussion, and that solving that and investing in solutions for that is going to be as critical as it is for perhaps more traditional forms of security and defense.
Frank answer first. Is food security globally top priority today? It was, it's no longer at the highest. There are the news of the Palestinian authorities, what happened in Gaza, what happens in Sudan. Everyone hears what's happening in Sudan, the Yemens, the Afghanistan. You switch the news, but the top news is clearly drones at the moment. So if you have drones and airports which are closing, the drone issue dominates. Sudan becomes number 2 or number 3. I think what's clear important is if you want peace, stability, and security, you can't forget SDG 2. However, the global system financing system or financing architecture of official development assistance, which is the grant element, is getting squeezed because the priorities are getting bigger. Transactionally, because everyone speaks about EU strategic interests, transactionally, it's easier from a political and market orientation to go to energy than to go to food. Why? Because in energy, you have solar energy and hydrogen at scale. In food, you have to handle with a lot of small farm holders, and you need to have a lot of conditionalities, like non-displacement on land tenure, indigenous rights, informal seed systems, youth employability, de-risking of small investments of less than 5 million. You don't have that in energy. You don't have that in critical raw materials. You don't have that in digital. You don't have that in vaccine and pharma. So the first thing is, how do you de-risk agri-food systems at scale? We do it in small scale, but we don't do it at scale. So the financial infrastructure has to be more attuned, because the financial institutions don't go in masses on scale to big programs. Why? Because it's complicated. We have still not done the trick to have EIB big in agri-food systems in Africa, for example. IFAD, we are trying, the World Bank and the IFC is trying. So the question now is, how do you reconcile the shrinking official development assistance, the grant element, with more private sector and more innovative instruments? Because everyone speaks about innovative instruments, green finance, but it's not being channeled to the most vulnerable groups in terms of carbon credits, for example. So all this needs to be factored. What is important is that we identify good corporate, beyond ESG, ticking the box, companies which can invest at scale in Africa, for example, on food fortification, infant foods, in fragile contexts, amongst others, and not just what we call the low-hanging fruits around cocoa value chains or coffee value chains or cashew nut value chains, but things like fruit and vegetables, livestock, diversified diets. So that is a bit the game changer, and clearly it's a wish that groups like this also approach us to see how we can identify business opportunities and de-risk investments at scale in a continent like Africa, which really needs heavy investment in terms of the transformation of food systems at the global level, also from a lens of peace and stability that clearly Europe will require even more in the years to come.
Leonard, thank you again for that. Do stay with us. Before I come back to you, Tamas, maybe to ask you to just reflect on everything that you've heard, not just in this panel, on the other panels this morning, and whether or not that adjusts your perspective on some of the thoughts that you shared with us earlier. That's a question I'm going to come back to you and put to you. Let me turn to you, Liam McHale, Director of the Irish Farmers Association. I don't know whether it's by accident or by design that we bring the voice of the farmer and only at the very end, and yet the centricity of the farmer to this is key. Again, when you've listened to everything that you've heard this morning, if you were here yesterday, where does that leave farmers? How do they need to respond to some of the things that we've been talking about this morning?
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be at the end because, as you say, I've had an opportunity to hear everything that's been talked about yesterday and today. The real farmer, of course, is sitting beside me, a farmer minister, and I had the pleasure of attending the Librement Agriculture Show back in July and listened to Anne-Catherine speaking to her farmers and exhorting them to taking on the measures that she has outlined so clearly. I go back to the first comment this morning. It was from Cédric de Morceau when he said, "The earth is fragile," and I would add, but very resilient. And Tassos, I think, picked up on that as well. The picture of the polar bear being able to adapt, being resilient, and farmers are that. I'm not a farmer, but I'm from a rural area, and I represent Irish farmers. And And I think it was Ed Davey who said we need to have, the younger voice in the room. Well, he wasn't referring to me, but this week I did have 27 of our young farmer leaders from Ireland over here, and they met with Elizabeth Werner, Director General of DG Agriculture, and it was inspiring to hear them. They haven't been weighed down with an additional 20 or 30 years of producing food under the current environment. But they delivered a very positive message, and they are embracing, they are doing the things that we're talking about. These people are very educated, well-travelled, and willing to change, and they don't take no for an answer. But at the same time, unfortunately, they're very rational. And many of these young children of farmers have decided, I'm not going to become a farmer, it doesn't add up. And that's the challenge that we have with generation renewal. And yes, there is a strategy, but it's going to take, I think we've almost missed a generation of young people who have chosen other careers. Looking at the importance of coherence, because sometimes we have the Commission trying to give us regulation that will improve the environment, but at the same time it can have impact on land price availability, which then means that young people can't even get on the ladder. We have the Commissioner for Environment, Commissioner Roswell, in Dublin today because Ireland is making a request in relation to nitrogen, nitrates and slurry emissions from our farms and how much we can spread on the land. This is critical for a huge number of reasons to these farmers. There are farmers and the next generation waiting on this decision from the Commission, and it may well be that they will stop farming if this doesn't, if this is not granted to Ireland. If we look at the technology and how we are using that in the whole sustainability and technology debate, farmers today are genotyping their animals. They are now looking at different characteristics to address the environmental challenges. And that's fantastic, but that takes time. And I think Eric mentioned it, that regulators don't give us time. But this breeding programs, they are showing benefits, but as I say, they will take a couple of years. And at the same time, if we have an animal disease, tuberculosis is an issue in Ireland, that wipes out 50 or 100 animals from a farmer's herd. And he could have been breeding the genetics into these animals for the last 5 or 10 years, and they're all gone. This week we had 2 cases of avian bird flu in Ireland. First 2 on a commercial poultry farm. We may not have turkey to eat on Christmas, but we're part of the single market, and the butchers in Ireland are saying, we'll get them from Italy, we'll get them somewhere, so we won't starve. And perhaps that is an issue. We don't have a food shortage right here, but Leonard, of course, understands the global aspect of that. I know that Ed Davey mentioned that President von der Leyen was very compelling. Well, some of our farmers might disagree. Yes, she is now listening to us since the farmer protests, but there's been a 20% cut to the agriculture budget in the CAP proposal. What does that mean? Well, it means that the Pillar 2 measures, and they are the measures for rural development on farms, where farmers get money for investment, greater efficiency, embracing technology. An example, low-emission slurry spreading. So a piece of equipment, 70,000 euros. You can get a grant worth up to 60%, which is worth about 40,000 euros. That money comes from this bucket of the CAP. And that's how we address the environmental issues of emissions. But without that money coming from the top down, that is the challenge the farmers face. They're being told and asked to do the right thing. They're trying, but they need to change behaviour. It's great to have one farmer putting in a buffer strip in his field or fencing off the water course so his animals don't take the water from the stream. But the farmer next door, if he doesn't change his behaviour, if he's not part of the measure, if he's not being incentivized, he might continue on. His animals are drinking from that stream, and there's, water quality, of course, is so critical. And I know Tassos has spoken about addressing soil. The important part there, I think, Tassos, you said, advisors will tell farmers about the soil. Well, not every country has got an extension service that allows advisors to inform and educate the farmers about the soil. There was a great measure that asked farmers to make a soil health plan. And what did they do with it? Did it, and into the shelf. And they didn't actually use it. But if they read it and realised that the pH of their soil wasn't optimum, if they added some lime, improved their pH, they wouldn't need to use as much artificial fertilisers, chemical fertilisers. And now we know that they cost money. So they cost money, so that is one reason why farmers maybe are using less. But here's your nature-based solution that is there. But we need advisors to educate the farmer. And the abundance of regulation means that sometimes the advisors are in front of a computer filling out all of the measures that the farmer needs to comply with to make his annual application for his subsidy payment, and not addressing the environmental measures which the advisor is educated to do. So when we say over-regulation, that's what we mean. I think it was mentioned earlier about the love of the land and farmers, that's why they do it. Farmers are mini SMEs. So competitiveness is just as important to a farmer as it is to the car industry. Farm families today are sitting around the mealtime crunching numbers. So I think there are a lot of measures that are being addressed by the Commission. If we look at the civil dialogue, those meetings now have not only the agriculture side of the house, but also the environment. You've got joint civil dialogues. That is joined up thinking. That is getting the same people in the room who are trying to address the same issue, rather than the more silo. Sometimes our farmer organisations are, would I dare say, the best educated, because we've been into each of the DGs and we know where the challenges are, and maybe not all of one side of the house within the Commission know the challenge of the other side of the house. That's why somebody like Emanuele and DG Klima, coming from, with his background, is a great way to bring that knowledge together, and puts the Commission in a better position to understand our issues and to have the different voices. So we always ask, listen to the farmers. Sometimes it is the farmers who know best. They're the ones who are out on the land. They're the ones who are walking and measuring the grass growth, in order to ensure that they've got better feed efficiency, so that we can address the challenge on the environment. So we're on the road there, but sometimes we don't get enough time. Thank you.
Liam, thank you. I want to stay with this theme a little bit, and also bring you back into the conversation, and Catherine, and start to open it up to the audience. Thomas, I'm going to come back to you on your overall reflections. I just want to bring in my good friend Jürgen Tack, who sat right in front of me, European Secretary General of the European Landowners Organization. Jürgen, I've listened to you talk about this on many occasions. A farmer today, this will resonate with Anne-Catherine and Liam as well. You go to the bank and you're looking for a financial investment over 20 to 30 years, and you're doing it on what sounds like very confusing policy signals that have been sent, and perhaps ones that change fairly rapidly over that 20 to 30 year lifespan of the investment that a farmer is making. How do farmers respond to that? What's your perspective on that, Jürgen?
Well, let's say if you make an investment over a period of 30 years, you want to make use of that investment. And that makes that, let's say, if in the meantime the CAP every 7 years is changing its direction completely, then the immediate effect you have is that farmers do not have a tendency to follow immediately. And I think that with new proposals on CAP, we had an event organized by ELO and the intergroup at the European Parliament earlier this week, where you were present. We have heard there that for probably the very first time, the European Parliament, from the extreme left up to the extreme right, they're all against the proposal. I see exactly the same at NGO level, going from environmental NGOs over farming-related NGOs. I think all of that is an effect of how much change can you absorb as a farmer. And that's something we really have to take into account. There is an additional aspect that we have a tendency to evaluate the CAP before the period of 7 years is even over, because that's the moment we are preparing the next one. And that makes that, in reality, we are putting new policy together based on information which is partial, because we are not even able to include all of the information of the effects of the latest policy. And let's say it's great to make all of those reports towards policy, but in the end you have to realize things in the field. And I think that, let's say, we have to make sure that for our farmers that we give them the possibility to think much further than those 7 years, so that an investment can be made on an educated choice. And that's not only the case for the farmer, that's also the case for the financial institutions which are providing them the money, because they too are asking for that stability, because otherwise what we see is that funding is decreasing from their side, or is becoming much more difficult. And we are often discussing the access to land. When I look at our membership, access to land is not the issue. The issue is the fact that the land is becoming more expensive, and it's an access to finance which is much more of an issue. And there I think policymakers have to take their responsibility.
And Catherine, maybe I just come back to you. I mean, Cedric talked at the beginning of these growing levels in the system, in the political system, decision making taking place. You in your role as a regional minister, you are responding. You're close to your farmers, and you're taking policy signals from the European Union. How do you manage that? How can you help to ensure that the guidance that farmers are getting are ones that they can actually respond to, and that their voice is then integrated and transported perhaps back up to the European level, also in the way obviously that the Farmer Association is doing? You have a difficult job.
Sure, thank you to acknowledge that. Yes, and I spoke about the strength of the Europe, but it's also the fact that we are many countries around the tables, giving the voice of the context of this country, of the particularity. It's not so easy when we speak to the commissioner and we say, okay, I need that, you need that. But I'm really European convinced, so I know that we can find compromise. And the compromise we have around all the member states is the budget of the CAP, for example. I must say, now I'm minister from 1 year and a half. The big issue of European Union is the generational renewal. Okay. And so we have the installation aid at the beginning of the career of a farmer. You can have, in Wallonia, 70,000 euro when you begin to be a farmer. And it's really necessary because at the beginning you have many debts because you must pay the capitals from the brother, the sister, or another farmer if it's a non-familial transmission, which is necessary also. And also with the land, you have big debts. And I don't have enough money to pay all the transmission of all the project of young farmers who are installating in Wallonia. I don't have enough money. And I said, okay, it's the priority of the Wallonia to have generational renewal. It's the biggest challenge. So I must find money somewhere in the CAP. So I find some solution in other measure, and I'm looking for. So finance from the regional part, and I find some solution, but it's easy, and it's the first priority. So I said, with less money in the cap, how I will do? For the environmental, for example, I want to keep the most of stability for the modality of the measure, or more simpler, or the same, and for the finance also. Because if a farmer knows that for cover crop, for example, or intercrop, it's this amount of money, if it's less in the next cap, they will say, I'm going to stop, which signal from the European Union. And so it's really my fear at this moment. It's not to can give at least this stability, because we know the inflation, but okay, we can face inflation, but at least the stability. And it's really my fear at this moment. We received the text from the CAP, we are analyzing this, but we know that we can have less money from the CAP in the next programmation. And I speak about the CAP, but another big lever from the European Union, it's all the treaties. And I was speaking about my initiative about phytosanitary products. I do all my day, and really my challenge was to keep the researcher and the farmers with me. Okay, not saying, it's not possible, or it's like still an ideal vision, but not. And everyone is convinced, and everyone wants to go in the same direction. I say, okay, it's a success. And then I receive a message from a farmer, because I know him. It's someone who has a lot of reflection about his activity, and he said, things you don't speak about today, it's the treaties. It's the international market, because I'm okay to use robots. I'm okay to use other varieties. I'm okay to do all you want. I want to protect my culture, and I want to use all the means I can. But if it's increased my cost of my production cost, what can I do regarding the sugar arriving from the South of America? What I can say to that? Okay, I hope that all the means we will use to protect the crops after the vision, the creation of the vision for each crop, will be the same price than now. But I'm not sure. And how they can follow this objective if they have this food who is arriving on our market and that our European citizens are eating. And I'm not against market, no. But we must be consistent. And at this moment, when we see the quota given in some treaties, it gives a lot of fear of will be strong enough to face that, because it's not one or two treaties. It's all the treaties we do. We must have a vision. Okay, I know that the Joint Research Center, some members are here. We know that they are analysis of that studies. Okay, at this one moment we give the maximum quota amongst all the treaties we must fix. Okay, and this it's okay for the farmers of Europe. We can face that, and we distributed this amongst all the treaties. And okay, but not more, not one and another, and we don't know how it will finish at the end and how it will be a pressure for farmers in Europe. So really I have this global vision for all the treaties. It's just what we want as minister who must guarantee some revenue, some good framework for farmers, and who wants the farmers.
Thanks so much indeed for that. I think it's one of the clearest explanations I've heard of some of the challenges that we have in transmitting these signals through to our farmers, and how we take that into account in policy making. And it's been a theme here this morning. It was a theme here in the meeting that Jürgen was referring to on Tuesday in the European Parliament. A lot more we could go into with that. So Thank you. I'm going to, at this point, just look around the room and see if there's a show of hands and interest in posing some questions, not just to my panelists up here right now, but those that have spoken during the morning. Yes, sir. Please take the microphone. Just say who you are and where you're from as normal.
Kurt Geisert, I'm one of the guys in the House of European History. Question for Mr. Mitzi. Thank you for describing the problems, for example, in Africa. Does Global Gateway Initiative, which started in 21, help in this context, or do we need more, especially now that the United States have reduced their help?
Our line as Commission is we can't fill completely the gap of the US. The US has been a big player, both humanitarian and in official development assistance. It's clear, two conditions here. First of all, Team Europe dynamics. We need better coordination amongst EU plus member states in terms of targeting. We can't do a bit of everything in a lot of countries in an uncoordinated way. So better coordination, strategic, EU strategic interests, but also in the interest of our partner countries, but not bits and pieces. Second, Global Gateway is a vision, it's a modality. Agriculture and food in the initial phases was not a top priority because this was more in hydrogen or in critical raw materials and in pharma. But it's clear we are being asked as a service to look into the agri-food dynamics beyond what we call the export crops, which are clearly non-competitive with European production. We don't yet produce cocoa or coffee or cashew nuts. But clearly that there are big opportunities, first of all, for EU strategic interests and the EU corporate interest, not only in food production and food manufacturing, but also in machinery innovation, in terms of the ecosystem of also training services, but also in a strategic way. How can we make Africa feed itself better with our technology and support in a geopolitically very charged way vis-à-vis other political partners, mainly China and the Gulf states, amongst others.
Others that might want to come in? Yes, sir.
Yes, hello, and thank you for your presentations. My name is Carlos Halil from Eurogroup for Animals. I would like to bring us to the fact that we started the conference by saying that emphasizing the importance of cooperation, of being more cooperative with other countries in order to achieve environmental objectives. But at the same time, we see the impacts, for instance, that some policies are doing. So, for instance, I'm thinking about trade policy, as it was referred towards the end of the presentations. What's your take on how to balance these two, let's say, contradicting figures on being more cooperative on the one hand, but at the same time being pushed back by trade policy in general? I'm thinking about, for instance, the EU-Mercosur trade agreement. Thanks.
Liam, I'm kind of tempted to let you have a first go at that. Maybe Anne-Catherine would like to begin, but I'd also like maybe Eric, if you wouldn't mind picking up on that, that'd be great.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, Carlos, for your intervention. I'm wondering, is it because that I was in Brazil last week that you're asking me to take on that question?
No comment.
Well, I was over at the World Meat Congress, so I got a good insight, obviously, over there into the thinking from the South America side as regards Mercosur. They're very positive towards it. Within Europe, farmer organizations have issues, and you're well aware of those. In fact, the farmer community and environmental groups would have been on the same side of the fence as regards a lot of the issues that within the trade policy that arise in such an agreement, whether that is in relation to deforestation specifically or into standards of animal traceability, animal welfare, even human rights, within Mercosur. We've always looked for fairness in a deal, that there is equivalence, and in many cases we don't see it. And we see reports from the Commission where they've actually gone in to look at some of the controls that are part of the trade policy, and they've found, say, in the case of Brazil, to be lacking. And it's very difficult for me to get our farmers to endorse a trade deal when the Commission themselves are saying, well, no, in some cases there are issues, we have issues with the control systems that are set up. I think we would expand our issues beyond Mercosur. We would look for reciprocity and point out the high cost to farmers within Europe in adhering to higher standards, when in a trade deal, sometimes we would say that the Commission is takes the compromise position where they say, well, look, in the greater good, we would like to sign this deal, even if we acknowledge that in some sectors are more vulnerable. They're already sensitive sectors. In fact, livestock farmers in Ireland, their income is 6 times less than a dairy farmer. So you've got this diversity. I mean, very often the only reason that a wife or a partner would let the farmer continue with their 20 animals is because it's an emotional connection. So we continue to object against Mercosur on those grounds, on animal welfare, on traceability, and on the difference in standards.
Thank you. And Catherine, not necessarily on Mercosur, unless you want to comment on that. Just from the political perspective as a minister, in a world which, as we've heard this morning, we're going to need collaboration to solve some of these big challenges that we've got in front of us, and yet a trade agenda that in some parts of the world is increasingly me first. How are we going to reconcile that from a political perspective, do you think?
I'm going to answer more directly to your question, and then yours. The question about the treaty is not to be yes or no. It's to be strategic. And strategic mid and long term, because regarding agriculture, it's not at short term. Yes, the benefits are better when we accept or reject the treaties, but with agriculture, when the agriculture is less and less strong during the years, in 10 years, 20 years, we have more to lose than to accept big benefits at short term. So it's really to be strategic regarding the quota we give, regarding the reciprocity of the norm. We see that with Ukraine, we say, okay, during the next 5-10 years, we want to improve the norms, and it was accepted. So we can advance in this direction. And the quota. And I think we have enough studies, analysis, good researchers at European levels to know what is really strategic for the agriculture and for the other activities to make the best compromise. And it's what we need, because we need friends. We need friends, yes. Particularly in our world today, when we see the geopolitical question. But we must be strategic, and we must put the food challenges, the food issue, in the priorities, and it's not what is felt on the field. It is really my vision regarding this topic.
And Eric, maybe a final reflection from you on that.
Well, there's 2 ways I could answer that question. One is, I mean, theoretically we say, economists would say, trade is good. If there's winners and losers, the winners can compensate the losers, right? But if that's not happening, well, then there's losers. And I think, given that the cap funds are going down, there is no compensation in that respect, right? Or maybe people are thinking, well, they're already getting so much money, but that's not how it works, right? Because there's something new there. Second thing I would like to bring on the table is innovation and product differentiation. And there is a paradox. If I want to treat my family with a good barbecue and put a nice steak on, which is different, than what I usually buy, what would I buy in my supermarket, well, a steak from Argentina. And that's even without, because that's being marketed in a way that's just, you know, I mean, we want to go for better quality beef, we'll buy Argentinian even without Mercosur. So there's a paradox there, and I think European industry needs to also, you know, beef up, I would say, in terms of innovation there.
I would give a plug to Irish beef as well, but that's Liam's job. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Elisabeth Lacoste. I'm the head of the European Sugar Beet Growers Association. Some of you know me already. I have maybe two comments on trade and one question regarding your presentation, Ana Luisa, a more technical question on carbon and your modeling exercise on carbon price integration. On trade, just to reflect on what has been said, the problem is with the losers is when it's always the same losers. So systematically, the same sector are losing through trade agreement, and that's an issue, and I will not elaborate more on that. You know perfectly the position of the European sugar beet sector as regards trade and the consistency with regards to the standards of production. But if I may, Mr. Mizzi, I would like to be a little bit provocative vis-à-vis ACP and LDCs countries, because I consider that the European Commission has also a part of responsibility and has thrown under the bus these ACP and LDC countries. I'm not speaking on their behalf, but as far as sugar is concerned, I've started already in the early 2000s. We've gone through the Everything But Arms initiative, the Economic Partnership Agreement. We have granted preferences to these countries, and rightly so. And with all the additional trade agreements and preferences that the EU Commission has granted all over the years with Ukraine, but also with some very tricky aspects of trade that we don't discuss a lot. For example, the inward processing regime. They are not entering the market, the EU market anymore, or with very few quantities. The EU market is not attractive for them anymore as far as sugar is concerned. They cannot compete anymore. They have been substituted by Latin America, by Brazil through inward processing regime, by Ukraine. So perhaps it's important that the EU Commission also, as far as EU trade policy is concerned, look at some consistency and coherence. So that's my comment. I'm a little bit provocative, but it's a big concern right now as far as our sugar sector is concerned. What's going on in trade is totally chaotic. And my question on carbon, technical question, how do you integrate carbon in your modeling? How do you integrate carbon price? You've mentioned the issue of certification, carbon farming. There's a big question mark there, whether private carbon markets or regulated market. So what kind of price, for example, of carbon do you have included in your model so as to reach these results? Thank you.
You take it first, Ana Luisa, that would be great, and then we'll come back to Leonard.
Okay, we use for agriculture, carbon price, we use 100 euros per million tons, and 60 for LULUCF, so forest, yeah, sequestration, yeah, 60. 60 okay. For LULUCF, yeah. 100 for... Yeah.
Leonard.
One of the most controversial topics, because the level playing field, like I have, as Elizabeth knows, and some of you know, I did 10 years of DG Agri, now I am almost 10 years in DG INTPA, so two sides of different sides of the coin. When we discuss with our African, Caribbean, and Pacific partners today, the reality compared to 10, 15 years ago is a totally different one. In fact, I received today very limited requests on sugar, for example. A bit more on bananas, on sugar, not much. There has been a shift also, gradual shift, into other export commodity, mainly. Cocoa, coffee, cashew nuts, these are the three top commodities today, not least because of the EUDR. It's clear that from a trade policy point of view, I can't speak on trade because this is, you know, DG Trade competence and DG Agri competence, but in general, there are two issues here. Preference erosion effects and spillover effects when you have a departure from multilateralism to bilateralism. And we are clearly, in a geopolitical context, going into bilateral trade agreements, more and more. Mercosur is mentioned. We just finished an agreement with Indonesia, and we are negotiating big time with India. And Mexico was also. So what happened in the US in the beginning of the year with the tariff escalations is clear. There's a flurry of activity, which now the question is, if you want to plug in the Ukraine specificities, then the Mercosur case, then India as a geopolitical power. Because here it's geopolitics. It's not just trade. I go to seminars where the African partners, yesterday told me, Leonard, carve out agriculture completely from WTO. It won't happen. So do we carve out completely agriculture from trade negotiations, trade concessions? Clearly, calibrating which quota here and there is important, but we know politically that Ukraine is a top priority for this Commission and for the next 10, 15 years. Top priority as much as enlargement is, as much as the African continent is. Now, is there an easy way out of how do you do a trade agreement where everyone is in win-win? It's not win-win, and always within the sector, one has also to see what is the net beneficial effect across the economy. Because here we are within like-minded in agriculture, but out there, there are the car industry, energy, manufacturing, services. So how do you balance all that? And at the end, politics plays a big part. And probably today, more than ever before, politics is the most important factor also in trade negotiations.
Leonard, thank you. Having begun my career back in the middle 1990s working on the banana trade dispute for one of those Caribbean bloc of countries, it seems that bananas I can never escape from, and it has indeed shown up in this meeting and hasn't disappointed that we've also talked about bananas here. Tamas has been waiting very patiently. I will just have one last look around the room to see if anyone else would like to comment. Yes, ma'am, you have the last question from the floor.
It's actually just not a question, and I was dragged into the conversation. My name is Yvonne Schlesche. In my previous life, I was an expert working with the Organization for Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific States. I was in charge of commodities, so the issues of sugar, cocoa, were actually under my my desk. I just wanted to add just a small comment regarding sugar, and also to agree with what Leonard has just mentioned in terms of the changes that have happened. Some years ago, the ACP countries were actually exporting sugar under the sugar protocol, which had the floor price. Now, over the years, I think that was in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, the sugar protocol was denounced. And what has happened now is that the price of sugar is actually better in the region, because right now you don't have that floor price that used to act as an incentive to actually get countries to export. And then another thing that has also happened now is there is also an emphasis on value addition countries are being encouraged. So you have a lot of initiatives which are pointing towards value addition, and this is where most of the ACP countries are trying to focus their attention on. But I would like to thank the lady for raising this issue. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Such an interesting and important reflection. I appreciate you raising that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're almost there. The end of that day and a half of really interesting interventions. Tamas, I've given you quite a lot of time to reflect on the question that I posed you about 25 minutes ago. You presented very eloquently and articulately, like everyone else, your data and what you think your models are telling you. Have you heard anything this morning, yesterday, that gives you more hope, or perhaps indeed more pessimism, or perhaps changes your perspectives on anything that you said earlier, based on what you've heard? Tamas.
Yes, thank you very much, and also thank you very much for giving me kind of the last reflections on this. It's a very nice position to be in. Yeah, it was really fascinating discussions and great inputs all around. So I think I really liked the discussions on the farmers and involving them. I think this is also from the modeler's perspective and from the scientific perspective, this is a key part for us. And also we learn so much about this. I mean, we are very keen of always discussing with farmers and also the industry, which is also not easy to reach in pure research projects in a sense. But we also fulfill a very critical role in this, because often we evaluate also lots of these policies are evaluated by research projects. There we can play around much more with different impacts of, let's say, trade policies or larger investments. And I think this is also a key exchange where, we have also the capacity to do this. So I think this is really a key part, and we are very happy. I think also within my project, we had excellent exchanges with farmers. We had a couple of people who were sharing amazing data sets, like farmers who are collecting huge amounts of data. And, it also gives us very nice perspectives and teaches us also what is all possible in a sense, and what can be achieved. So I think also on the regenerative farming side, there were very good approaches there. And I think we are very excited of trying that out and seeing also which kind of policies can really enhance that. So in a sense, seeing results-oriented payments that can bring this about. And then I would also come back at the last part towards also, because I saw lots of the perspectives that are reflected in the paper also that I mentioned, and where lots of, both the role of the bioeconomy was mentioned, the role of trade, need for new policies, and the food security in Europe. And I think these are all key parts where essentially from the policy, bold action is needed. So essentially, I think Europe should also double down, and agriculture, financing agriculture is a very key part in that. I mean, also earlier our modeling has shown, and in a sense, I think investments there can unlock innovation. We are, based on competitive assessments in the bioeconomy, we are quite ahead. This is one of the areas where Europe is fairly leading. So investment, strong investment in the bioeconomy, and this also, of course, has to do with the agricultural sector, would pay off manifold according to our modeling and what we see. And I think this would create also spillovers where lots of these issues can be addressed. Of course, this would also go into investment in research, both in R&D in agriculture, as well as in modeling capabilities that can reflect lots of these questions. And I think also for it's very important for lots of these talks also on the trade that I've seen recently, that, I mean, we have models capable of essentially, taking this into account and showing the results. I think it's very important that lots of these policy questions be addressed in modeling, because we can actually put numbers on them, and we can put on these kind of scenarios where we are debating what would be the best, what would be a forward way of essentially guaranteeing farmers' incomes. Lots of the models can show at least what probable futures would lie ahead and would put numbers to these discussions. So I think that's very clear.
Tamas, thank you very much indeed. I gave you 25 minutes, but I hadn't asked you to do that at the beginning, and that was an excellent summary. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed about there. It just gives me a few moments just to express some thanks once again to Cedric and the Committee of the Regions for hosting us today. It's been absolutely fantastic to be in this room. Our collaboration with the OECD, FAO on this is second to none, and is something that I think gives credibility, it gives gravitas, it gives substance, most importantly, to these discussions, and so I'm very grateful to those that have collaborated. I'd also thank Tassos in particular, a great inspiration behind these series of events that we've begun starting last year and again here today. To my last panelists, Anne-Catherine, Liam, Leonard, Tamas, thank you so much indeed to all the contributors and speakers and panelists that are still in the room and joined us yesterday. Thank you. And a final thanks, two final thanks, one to the organising team, Emma Wallaron-Kier, thanks for all you've done in putting this together. And the last and biggest thanks of all, of course, is to you, the audience. It wouldn't be an event without it. I hope you've got some good takeaways from this. The challenges are large. They are growing. They're not intractable, as we've heard today. There are causes for optimism, even if sometimes that can be laced with pessimism. I often sign off these events by saying that's all, folks. Today I'm going to sign off by saying courage, because we need it. And if we have it, we'll win. Thank you very much.